Welcome to another exciting episode of the Young Pioneer Podcast. Today we're thrilled to bring you an engaging interview with popular travel YouTuber Mike O'Kennedy. Known for his thrilling adventures across China, India, and more, Mike will be sharing his insights into his viral video from his recent trip with us to North Korea. Following Mike's interview, we'll unveil exciting information about our new tours themed in the footsteps of conflict, where you'll have the opportunity to explore some of the world's most fascinating and misunderstood regions. I'm Justin Martell, and this is the Young Pioneer Podcast.
저선주왕 방송입니다.
Okay, welcome to the Young Pioneer Podcast, where we bring you the most fascinating voices from around the world. Today we have a special guest, travel content creator Mike O'Kennedy. Mike isn't your typical travel influencer. He doesn't just visit tourist hotspots. He immerses himself in some of the most unconventional, misunderstood, and sometimes even dangerous destinations on the planet. And I know this firsthand because Mike and I actually traveled together to North Korea in February with me as his guide. So if you've seen his popular video on North Korea, which has garnered around 8 billion views since being released, you might have spotted me in it, huffing North Korean 727 SIGs and shooting North Korean Pyongyang-ju. And today we'll be talking about Mike's other adventures in Iraq, the mobster-run Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone in Laos, China's most politically sensitive and controversial province, Xinjiang, and what it really means to be a traveler in today's digital age. So, Mike, welcome to the Young Pioneer Podcast. For the intro music, I wanted to use Highway to Hell because I was just watching a YouTube video of you driving down a motorcycle down a former CIA airstrip in Laos to Highway to Hell. But for copyright reasons, we'll use a North Korean song.
Well, people can just imagine that in the back of their heads. Thank you so much, Justin. It's an honor that you asked me to do this, and it was an even bigger honor to be able to actually travel with North Korea with you. I think you're probably the perfect person that I could have traveled in there with. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it was certainly a unique trip, and I think we didn't know at the time how unique it was, considering how briefly Rason reopened to tourism and then quickly closed again.
Yeah, dude. What's going on with that? It's not. We'll get into it, but I remember getting the phone call from you. I was sat at a desk in Starbucks in Hanoi and getting a phone call from you saying, "Have you seen the news yet?" And I was like, "God, what's happened? What's happened?" Yeah, you said that they've just indefinitely closed the borders again. Any more news about that?
Yes. Well, let's we can come back around to that. I mean, in a general sense, North Korea is still closed to tourism. We have just gotten permission to bring a group into Pyongyang for the trade fair that's happening in Pyongyang in May. So we'll be bringing a group of about 14 people to Pyongyang to go to the trade fair, which is a really good window into North Korea's economy. So you can see the countries and that are doing business in the DPRK. They're doing trade with the DPRK. Obviously, a lot of Chinese and Russian companies that are selling their goods at the trade fair. And then, of course, we'll mix that with some sightseeing as well. Although we've had a strict policy of, no content creators or influencers on it. So we'll come back to let's come back to the influencer question as we discuss this. But all right, let's go to the beginning, and I want to just get a little bit of background. So you've built a reputation for exploring places that most travelers wouldn't dare visit. So what sparked your passion for this kind of adventure travel?
I think that we're living in a world, dude, where the world's getting smaller and smaller and smaller year by year. You know, there are places, there's almost nowhere that someone hasn't been. Do you know what I mean? And I just became fascinated with the least I say least visited places, but I just get fascinated by when you start traveling to places that are pretty kind of out there. You get a bit desensitized every time. So I guess where it started, and if we want to go really far back, my father was in the military, and when I was about 16 years old, he got stationed in Israel, right? So he was living out in Israel, working on the UK embassy, and I would go and visit him in the school holidays. And, I'd go over there and I'd be 17 years old and I would just travel around Israel alone at 17 years old. And it was a time where, there were rockets coming in from Gaza. And yeah, it was a young age for me to be doing, it wasn't dangerous. I wasn't in any danger, but it was a young age for me to be doing, something that your average 17-year-old doesn't do. And I got a bit of a travel bug from doing that, I suppose. And then, by the time I really started traveling in my early 20s, it was, I just wanted to go to places that gave me that same level of excitement. And I think that's probably where I landed on Xinjiang. I mean, in India as well, I traveled to some really, really remote locations in Northeast India. Yeah, I guess it stemmed from there, but the YouTube specifically kind of picked up around the Xinjiang time. And I just got really interested in, okay, hang on a minute. This is a place where all we really see about it is pretty negative stuff. And I went there and had a great time and met some really cool people, met some friendly people, caring people that wanted to look after me. And everywhere I went after that was a similar story, man.
Yeah, I mean, at what point did you start making videos for YouTube and chronicling your travels? Like, what point did you say, okay, this is interesting, I'm going to try to do it? And did you plan for it, or was it just like, I'll just upload my stuff to YouTube and then...
It just happened, dude. So I was on my second trip to India at the time. And
so how long ago was this?
So this would have been 2022, I think, because it was post-COVID. So only 3 years ago, really. And I read an article about these headhunters in Northeast India, a place called Nagaland. And there are these very, very old people who 100 years ago had a kind of tribal law that the way that they would settle disputes in these villages was that they would send a warrior from each village, the strongest warrior from each village. They would get together and whoever collected the other one's head, like physically chopped it off its body and brought it back to the village, would be the victor, and then that village would kind of win that battle or whatever. And I became fixated in that. So I thought in my head, I'd never picked up a camera before in my life. I was like, right, I'm going to go to meet these headhunters and I'm going to try to interview them. But on the way, this was in Northeast India, so it's, takes a couple of weeks to get up to them. Very, very remote location. On the way, I'll kind of learn how to vlog, right? So I'd done a little bit. So I'd done a little bit of cinematographic. What's the word I'm looking for? Like
you've done a bit of film work. I mean, we talked about it.
A little bit of film work. Yeah,
we talked about it because my background is originally in film and TV, and
exactly.
I think you've worked in art department on productions.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So I worked in the art department before that, and I'd done a little kind of a short film a couple of years before that. But it was my first time really talking on camera, so I wanted to learn how to talk on camera. So I would I kind of documented my travels through Northeast India, and it was total crap. Like the videos themselves, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to speak on camera. That interview actually is not on YouTube anymore, but I did interview that headhunter. It was an awful interview, so much so that I actually took it off YouTube. But I returned to the UK. No one watched the videos either, absolutely no one. I returned to the UK with a bit of a kind of bug of like, okay, that was interesting and I think I'm good at it, even though no one watched it. I think there might be something there. So I went back to the UK and I worked on the second season of House of the Dragon in the art department, standby props. And about halfway through that job, I again just started becoming fixated on tribes across India. So I was like, right, I love India, but India is a big part of my life anyway. I've been traveling there since 2019. And I was like, right, I'm going to learn about a bunch of different tribes across India. And then I'll travel across the country and I'll make documentaries about each one. Or like kind of vlogumentaries, whatever you want to call it. So I did that. I left that job behind. I left a relationship. I left, pretty much everything, saved up about £4,000 and went back to India and started making these documentaries. I spent some time living with some nomads. I went back to Nagaland and did some cool stuff up there. But once again, I kind of ended that trip with not much of an audience and definitely no money. So I was like, right, what do I do? So I moved back to my former home of Vietnam. I'd spent a few years living in Vietnam previous to that. So I was like, right, I'll go to Vietnam. I'll teach English because, you get quite good money. You've lived in Asia. I'm sure you can make quite good money teaching English, $20 an hour. So I was like, right, I'll go back to Vietnam. I'll save up, a couple of thousand, and I'll go off again, and I'll come back, and I'll just keep doing that, even if no one watches it. I'll just save up money teaching, go away, make videos, and I did that for about another year, and then I didn't start going full time on it until the Western China stuff.
Okay, and that's what kind of kicked everything off. And I wanted to talk about, before we start getting into those specific experiences, I've been watching a lot of your. I have to admit, I hadn't seen any of your videos prior to us meeting. That's because as somebody who works in sort of, I guess, the adventure travel field, I tend to not watch too much of the content creators, just because, I think, and I don't want to in any way sound like snobbish or anything, but I think for a lot of travelers a lot of frequent travelers, people who travel to unusual places, sometimes influencers get a little bit of a bad rap because the general consensus in a lot of the travel community is that they're not, they're putting out a sensationalized version of the experience that's designed to attract views and followers and many of the people, millions of the people who watch these videos will never ever go to these places, right? So it attracts an audience that's living vicariously through the influencer, and of course, the more sensational, the more views. So it's very easy to see how we've gotten to that place. But I've really enjoyed watching your content because it's, you mix a lot of, the scenery, the culture, the history, and also interactions with the people. You're also not afraid to have fun at your own expense. Like you incorporate bloopers into the videos. You're showing people how the sausage is made, as it were, and like you say things like, I'm not good at talking about food. I'm trying to get better at talking about food, and it kind of reminds me of like an Anthony Bourdain meets Jackass sort of vibe, which is fun. So, I mean, is your style something that you sort of, that's just you off the cuff? I mean, how did what I'm trying to say is, in a long-winded way, is you have a unique brand. And how did you develop the sort of the Mike O'Kennedy brand? Did you look at what other people were doing and say, I'm going to do something a little different? Or was it just kind of accidental, or both?
I think that the thing is, I'm kind of similar to you in the sense that I also was never a big fan of like travel content, because travel was my life for many years. Like I wanted to watch other stuff that I wasn't doing. Even now, I don't really watch much other travel content. But I think one of the reasons I didn't watch that much travel content was because I didn't like what was already out there. And again, it was, for me, my ethos is, right, if someone wants to watch a highly tuned, polished version of a documentary or an insight to another country, they can turn on Amazon Prime, and they can turn on Netflix, and they can turn on, Channel 4 or BBC, and they can see that. What you can't see on any of those platforms is something kind of real and authentic, and what does it genuinely look like when one dude travels to another country with a $400 consumer camera. So in regards to kind of the bloopers and being honest, it's just, I just wanted to be as real as kind of as real as possible with the audience. And that was a style I probably just developed through trial and error. I was like, hey, I'm not a journalist. I'm not a presenter. I haven't been trained in this, so I'm not going to pretend that I am. I'm gonna be real. And I think the thing that resonates with people is that authenticity. Showing the shitty moments, showing the moments, sorry, I don't know if I can swear, but showing the kind of moments that I mess up, or things go really badly, or I put the bloopers in there just to kind of show people that real side of it. And to be honest, with the food thing, I'm like, look, if you want food, go and watch Mark Wiens. Don't watch, don't watch me. I'm not good at that. And I think if someone's going to spend an hour a week or 30 minutes a week with me from their front room, then it should be like the most real version of me. It wasn't something that I intentionally really tried to do. I guess I just started doing it by accident, and then people liked that side of it. That's one reason why, to be honest with you, the North Korea stuff was really, really difficult for me, because we were in a group of like 8 other tourists, not including yourself and Yen Yen, and we had the North Korean guides with us as well. So I didn't feel comfortable being totally myself. Do you know what I mean? Because we're walking around. Whereas a lot of people might feel more comfortable being in a tour group, I feel less comfortable. It's like being out of my comfort zone. So I couldn't really 100% be myself unless I was like alone in the hotel room. Do you know what I mean?
So let's actually get into the specifics and discuss your kind of media splash with North Korea, since that's where we traveled together. And it was significant because we made history as the first Western tour group to come in after the pandemic. So that was significant. So as soon as we all came out, there were media that wanted to talk to me. They wanted to talk to you. And your video quickly got millions of views. And it's been interesting though watching, because we ran 2 tours. Both of them had a lot of influencers on them, and it's been interesting watching this people who went on the same guided tour with the same itinerary and basically experienced the same thing, but you see wildly different perspectives
for sure
from the different people who went on this trip. So and I've received more feedback about appearing in that video than being on CNN or anything else since the trip. But so I guess I wanted to ask, so what sparked your interest in traveling, in doing a video to North Korea? And how did you come to book with us? I got to do a little bit of, maybe you'll compliment us a little bit. How did you discover us? How did you decide, okay, I want to go to North Korea and do a video? What went into that?
So, I mean, as a traveler, North Korea had been on my radar since like forever, right? Not everyone, but a lot of people. North Korea is one of the most, obviously, secretive, kind of elusive countries in the world, especially in the past 5 years. So in my head, it's like, who wouldn't want to go there? Who wouldn't want the opportunity to go there? So from about, I would say, halfway through 2024, I probably sent emails to about 8 different companies that had previously done tours to North Korea before, Young Pioneer being one of them. And I just kind of not hounded them, but every couple of months I checked the news, because originally there was going to be, they were saying maybe in December they were going to open up, or maybe it was even earlier than that at one point.
There were numerous rumors and false starts and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so I was just kind of keeping an eye on the news constantly, and every kind of month or so I think I would check in with. I just wanted to hound the tour companies and say, look, I'd like to be one of the first ones in there. And I knew that from a content creator standpoint, I knew that whoever was going to be the first one in and out and release the video, is going to be one of the biggest travel videos of the year. I just knew it. It was going to be one of the most talked about travel videos. It would probably have one of the highest the view rates. I just knew it. So I had my eyes set on it, dude. And then and I'd been, me and Christoph, who's on the admin team, right, at Young Pioneer. So Christoph's on the kind of admin team. He got back to me, right, and there was another company, I won't name them, but there was another company that said, yeah, cool, you can come with us. And actually, they didn't end up doing the tour, but they said, you can come with us. And I said, I want to be completely transparent with you. I'm not a journalist, but I do make YouTube videos, and this is my YouTube channel. And he replied to me saying, oh, they're never going to let you in. So I kind of closed that door, and then I spoke with Christoph, and I said, hey, man, again, being completely transparent, I'm a YouTuber. And he said, oh, he thinks that it'll work fine. So I was like, sweet, built up a pretty good kind of contact with Christoph over the next couple of weeks. And he was like, okay, we're going to go. He said, Mike, you're in. We're going on, I guess it would have been beginning of February, right? Or maybe very end of Jan. And then it got moved, right, to, I think, the 2nd of March was the rumoured date. And I had flown, so I was like, okay, I'll fly to Northeast India. I'm going to shoot some content there over the next couple of weeks, and that will time in perfectly with the 2nd of March. So I've flown to Northeast India. It's about 16 hours, about 10 hours on a flight, 6 hours to my friend's village in the middle of nowhere. And I look at my phone the second I go out of the taxi. I look at my phone, and there was an email from Christoph saying, hey, mate, we're going in 4 days. And I was like, oh, shit, okay. And I nearly didn't come, dude. I nearly was like, can I go back to Vietnam and then to China and then to North Korea? But anyway, I did in the end. But my fascination was 50% down to me wanting to go and see it. I would have loved it to have been Pyongyang and that whole the tour that you previously ran before pre-COVID, and 50% of it was knowing that whoever can get in there and make some good content is gonna blow up, which is kind of a shame because I've got this kind of like this bit of this ethical dilemma when it comes to content creating, that people just go there to create the content, right, and then it kind of loses its value, or the place loses its magic because people just go there and make content and then leave. And I used to say to myself, my rule always was, would I still go there if I wasn't making a video about it? And if the answer is yes, then I do it. And North Korea is always going to be a yes every single time. I would always go there. So yeah, that was kind of where my fixation came in, and how it happened. And Young Pioneer tours were the absolute most responsive, considering I'm sure that you guys had a flood of emails and messages. You guys were super responsive, and I thought, right, these are the guys I want to go with. The only time I'd heard about you beforehand was actually the Otto Warmbier thing. That was the only time I'd ever heard your name before that. But it didn't bother me. I don't think, some people, I did a lot of Reddit searches about Young Pioneer before I left. And, there are threads online that are like, oh, why would you want to go with the tour group that an event like that happened on? And that was going to happen, dude. That was going to happen no matter what tour company that he'd gone with. Do you know what I mean? So,
with regard to that situation, our only involvement in it is that he was traveling with us. Beyond that,
exactly,
we have no involvement.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so let's say then. All right. So even if you got the email back and it said you can come with us, but you can't film, we can get you the visa, because I understand the other company said to you, "Oh, they're never gonna let you in." If we'd come back and said you can come, but you can't film, what would you would you have come still?
That's a really good question. I think in that exact moment, I probably would have. I think if I'm going to go to North Korea without filming, then I probably would have wanted to wait for the Pyongyang. Do you know what I mean? Because if I'm going to go without filming, then I can go, well, I'll just go in a few months. But I think the key thing for me was being the first content creator in the country, and I'd already had quite a big. I'd just come off the back of a big China series, so like people like watching me for that kind of, that East Asia stuff. So honestly, I think I probably would have stayed in India, and then I would have said, look, I'll come. I'll come and do another trip with you, which I won't film, but I'll probably would have wanted it to be the Pyongyang stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. Well, listen, as fate would have it, you did come, you were able to film, and now you had a viral video, and you've been on you've been doing news interviews and podcasts and everything. So it's been... Yeah.
Oh, it's been an absolute... It's been... The last month has been the craziest month of my life, dude. It's just... Things have blown up for me career-wise drastically, I think I was sitting at about 400,000 subscribers before North Korea, and I'm now nearly on 700,000, which is absolutely bonkers. It's not always a good thing because, you get a lot of people that just watch one of your videos and then, subscribers is a vanity metric anyway. But, it's blown up career-wise. I'm going to London next Monday to shoot a podcast, one of the biggest podcasts in the UK. It kind of like not really minding your demographic. It's more like late teens, kind of like kids like watching these guys. But I'm doing a thing with them, so that'll be cool. And I've so many opportunities have opened up from this. I've had producers contact me from, they want to start pitching. They want me to host some documentaries that they're now pitching to. They want to start pitching to networks. So it's blown up big style, bro. Big style.
And you even got to tell the Daily Mail to fuck off.
I did get to tell the Daily Mail to fuck off. Yeah. They did a story on me. So I went to Xinjiang, China, about just under a year, about 9 months ago. And there's this big thing at the moment, dude. I don't know if you know anything about it, but people think, for some reason, China is, again, we're going on a tangent, I hope you don't mind. China is the only country in the world where you seem to not be able to go to and make a video about without people accusing you of being paid propagandists for China.
Well, I think the only other one would be North Korea. If you go to North Korea and say anything remotely positive,
Yeah, exactly. North Korea would be another one, but I went to the thing. I did a thing in China again. I broke 8 different laws in China, like hitchhiking on the highway and camping out in the middle of nowhere and all this other stuff. And then Daily Mail did an article which was happy-go-lucky vlogger makes propaganda for China, paid propaganda for China, and they just absolutely slated me in this thing. And then even I got another email from the Mail Online actually today saying, can we do an interview with you? And it's like, dude, you know, I know they don't really care, but you don't slander a content creator for the work that they've done and then ask them if they'll jump on and do an interview with you. It's crazy.
Well, we've been totally raked through the coals with the Daily Mail, and they when Rason closed the tourism, they contacted us and wanted a statement, and I said, yeah, you can call me. And I took the call and I said, all right, the Daily Mail, what's your angle? When I answered the phone, I said, just tell me now, what's it going to be? And they were very, it's just going to be about, the closing and everything. And I said, all right. And I gave, I think, a few sentences about the closure and, our position on it and what our reason, what we think the reasons were. And I gave about 5 photos, and they said, oh, do you think you could provide some videos? And I said, well, are you going to hyperlink to us in the article? They said, no, we don't do hyperlinks. I said, well, that's it then. I mean, if I'm going to deal with the Daily Mail, it's going to be a quid pro quo situation, and that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Like, do you know what I mean? It's kind of like it's a bit of a give and take. It's always a bit of a give and take thing. And actually, dude, I've been really surprised since we got out of some of these big networks that I've done interviews with. that were really kind of like on the line and pretty unbiased with some of the stuff. They were, BBC was the worst because they just took all of the negative things I said and made an article about it. Fox News, which surprised me loads. I had an awesome interview with Fox News. Lovely girl. And she made a really cool, like just fair and nice interview. Same with the Washington, was it the Washington Post? I can't remember who I did it with now. But they did a kind of good one as well, which surprised me. Why is that, do you think? Why do these kind of, generally politically biased networks, why do you think they didn't take it, all the way one way?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. And I think on the last podcast, Will Ripley and I were talking about this a little bit. I think because we've sort of come past the period where, the most in-depth coverage or popular coverage of North Korea that was really accessible was like the Vice coverage. And that kind of ushered in this era of anytime the DPRK was reported on, it was done in kind of a snarky manner, almost just making fun of anything that, any news that came out of the country and things like that. And I think that in the last, decade or so, or decade and a half, the sort of way that the media has approached the country and the coverage has changed. It's become more... it's gone back to more serious and, fair journalism. And, I think people like Will Ripley have, contributed to that where, obviously they still raise tough questions, but they're legitimate questions, rather than going, I think that we've seen the media go away from, as Will Ripley said, the low hanging fruit type stories. And, listen, we know that the DPRK has a human rights issue. We know that there are malnutrition issues and food issues. We know that the average person does not have access to a lot of information from the outside world, that they don't have the internet. We don't need to continue to repeat these things. We understand that. It's fine. It's obviously fair to mention, but there's so much more that we can discuss. The conversation can go so much further, and there's so many more interesting and fascinating things about North Korea rather than just like going on this surface level thing. So I think that's why. And I think it's really interesting too, you have like Fox News, which is known as a conservative media outlet that, 10 years ago probably would have run a really negative piece on you. But in the U.S., at least, it's really interesting. In the sort of right wing and Republican and Trump establishment has become a lot more open-minded about North Korea because of Donald Trump's engagement with Kim Jong-un. And all of that kind of, the fact that he came out and he did those summits with President Trump and they met at the DMZ and they did these things, I think did a lot to, sort of legitimize him on the world stage. Not to say that like people, necessarily like him or view him, positively, but I think in terms of accepting him as a legitimate leader of a country, it legitimized him in a way. And I think that influences a lot of the media coverage.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Hanoi actually when Kim and Trump met. I saw their cars went past me in the old quarter. And that was a moment of like, that was a super historic moment. And you're right, it legitimizes and humanizes. It humanizes him and it humanizes the people. In a world where like all we ever hear about the country is, Camp 14 and Otto and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, well, it was one of the first times where your average Joe had been exposed to like regular political, news about the country.
Exactly. And regardless of what you think of Donald Trump or Kim Jong-un, the fact that you see these moments, like these unscripted moments where they're in a conference room and Donald Trump's going, all right, do we look nice and thin, and those sorts of things, or where they're meeting at the DMZ and they're saying, how are you, my friend? And blah, blah, blah. I mean, those were some, again, say what you want, but some of those moments were smooth as silk. And I think
100%.
100%. I think that influences it. So going back to your trip, And then we want to move on because I don't want. It's funny. I was joking the other day with that. This is like the North Korea season because the last couple, we're in season 3 of the Young Pioneer podcast, and the last couple episodes have been all about North Korea. But
you're right. I don't want to keep tracking to back to North Korea. I'm sure you're probably sick of talking about North Korea.
I never get sick of it, but I want to let's talk about your individual experience rather than the North Korea in a general sense. So just talk us a little bit through your creative process. Again, you talked about it being challenging because you were on a guided tour. You did have the guides obviously calling out some places that were sensitive that they didn't want you to film. So you were kind of restricted in that sense. A lot of your videos have you walking down the street, talking and things like that. You were relegated to doing those sort of things in your hotel room. Just bring me through the creative process from your perspective, because for me, you emerged with a pretty balanced video that was, you had some really funny stuff, but I really feel that you were quite objective. Like even though you show the students performing with the rockets videos of the rockets launching behind them, you comment that it's unusual. Well, because it is. Because that's only in North Korea would you see such a thing. But again, you don't take it to the, this degree of like, isn't this the freakiest thing you've ever seen in your life? And I thought that was, so I thought you walked the line really well. So take us through the creative process.
So before I go on to like why I chose to, display it the way I did in terms of like my personal emotions about the trip. Physically, I knew it was going to be a challenge because, I don't feel super comfortable like standing around 10 other like. I don't want to ruin the people have paid good money to come to a North Korea trip. The last thing they want is some bloody YouTuber to be ruining, their whole thing by talking in a camera in their ear the entire time. So I knew before going in it's going to be when and where will I be able to take myself off when we're out for the day, right? And kind of have a little comment on something or have a little joke or talk about what we're doing. I knew that about 50% of it was going to have to be done in post. So as we were going, I was like filming stuff on my phone. I just got a new phone, so I had a good quality kind of cinematic, that was the word I was looking for earlier on, cinematic footage of the country and the countryside and the people. And I would just decided I would do it over voiceovers. Totally different to anything I've ever done before. Like to be at like 99.9% just me talking to the camera and the people I meet. But I knew that a lot of it was going to be done in post, kind of more like a conventional, traditional documentary. So that was what I was thinking of, kind of physically. And yeah, in regards to the line that I walked, dude, I think that having you with me on the trip was really good because you humanized everyone a lot more. And you kind of made me think about the other side of pretty much everything. I think going into North Korea, we have these preconceptions that this is like this evil, dark, twisted place, and everything we see is going to be totally fucked up. And it just wasn't the case. And I would have felt like, I'm in their country. They've invited me. They've essentially invited us into their country after 5 years. And I knew it was an incredibly sensitive. It was always going to be an incredibly sensitive time to go in. But I went in there, dude. They treated us really well. They were kind to us. The kids were cool. It's okay, take your time. The kids were really cool. The people were really nice. And I just thought, like, I'm not gonna come out and make this, this video where I'm just shitting on them. I just didn't want to do that. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. It would have been a disservice, and it just would have been disrespectful. And at the end of the day, my honest opinions were that it wasn't this like super messed up place. And I think that's when I did a lot of these interviews, they were expecting me to say like all of these negative things. And Yeah, there were kids dancing in front of dancing in front of missiles, and yeah, that was weird. But they also put on a really, really solid, great performance. You know, these kids are putting on I said in the video, these kids have more talent in their little finger than I do in my entire body. I'm not going to go in there and walk out and say, God, that was the most fucked up thing I've ever seen. I just wasn't going to do that. Everything you see in the video is genuinely like my actual feelings about the place. And I wasn't purposely trying to walk the line. I wasn't trying to go one way or the other. It was just the way I saw things. Again, going back to what we said earlier on about being real. Other people have gone in and come out with this, you know, incredibly negative, sinister documentary. And it just wasn't the case. It wasn't the case. I didn't feel like that at any point. 99% of the anxiety and the paranoia I was feeling came from my preconceptions. I remember one time where we were sitting in a restaurant and they came around and asked everyone what our jobs were, because they needed clarification what our jobs were. And in your head, you start spiraling and you go, oh, well, you know, why is that? Why do they want to know our jobs? Is it because of this? Is it because of that? So, you know, I was paranoid a lot of the time and I was anxious a lot of the time, but I'm pretty sure most of it came from my preconceptions. And, you know, my experience there was exactly how I documented it. And I didn't feel like making it sinister or negative.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is that, you know, two things can be true at once. You know, it is true that North Korea does use tourism as a means to showcase what they feel is the best of the country, which is in a way a form of political theater. However, that does not necessarily stop you from forming actual relationships with your guides, having unscripted conversations, seeing how people are actually living. You might not be able to film all of those things. So, we passed through like many rural like farming villages, and we passed through the villages. They didn't want us filming that stuff, but you saw it. You know, you could actually see, you know, were you able to go in and walk into a house? No, but, you know, we could see like how people were living. And, you know, like one of the best examples of like a very funny unscripted conversation that I wish was on camera, but it wasn't. It was when we were in the pharmacy and you walk up to our guide, Mr. Moon, and you ask about contraception and birth control. Mm-hmm. And I start trying to help you with it. And he immediately turns to you and sort of waves and tells you to shut the camera off. But what audiences didn't see after that, so it's just like, it looks like you have a North Korean guy just being like, oh, birth control? Yeah, shut off the camera. But then what happened was there was this really funny interaction after where the pharmacist explains, no, we want to encourage people to have more children for the Korean nation, so we have things like this. And she brought out a natural supplement that they explained was a boner pill. Oh, you've got it right there.
In my hand. I got this from my dad. For those of you that obviously no one can see this right now, but I'm currently in my hand holding a 100% made in the DPRK herbal Viagra, essentially, sexual arousement pill. And Justin's right. And actually this is there were in that first video, I think was really good. There were so many things I did in that second video or creative decisions I made that I do really regret. I can't remember why, but I just kind of lost this creative boost. Anyway, there was a point where we'd asked our guide and the women at the pharmacy why they don't use contraception. And they showed us this and they said, we almost do the opposite here. We want people to procreate. We want people to have babies. And it was just really, you know, natural, like real moment, a jokey moment that you would not expect to have. And, you know, one of the things I kind of regret, I get so many comments of people telling me, oh, it's like the real life Truman Show, right? That people genuinely truly believe that everything and everyone we saw was an actor and it was somehow staged. And I remember there was something stuck in my head that you said to me on the first day, which was, we're not that fucking important, right? You know, are they really going to kind of like, yeah, it's funneled, and some of the places that they take us to may have just been only available for tourists and not locals.
Yeah, and when you go to a school, they do say there's going to be foreigners coming through. Everyone look sharp, do your thing.
Yeah.
Yes, obviously.
Yeah, and they rehearse, what they're going to be showing to the foreigners, especially with that foreign language school. They'd obviously rehearse that classroom kind of little bit that they did. But I used to be a school teacher, and if we had guests coming in, I would say to the kids, look, best behavior. Right, here's what everyone's going to do today, because we've got guests coming in. We're going to do a bit of group work, and then you guys are going to do a bit of this, and then you're going to do your little presentation. So, to go as far as to say everything is the real life Truman Show was kind of mental. And I guess I did a disservice by not getting across on camera that I obviously didn't do a good enough job, because I made a documentary that made people come away and think everything was fake. But the reality of it is, if those of you want to go to North Korea, it's absolutely impossible for you to drive from the border of China and North Korea to, a kind of sub-city and a big city and go around, and for them to control every single aspect of that trip. It's physically impossible. They'd be losing far more money than what we paid for them to get in on just kind of having to choreograph that. So, that's my kind of biggest gripe about what people think about these North Korea trips. You can absolutely kind of have a unique, I get it. Everyone does the same thing, but you can have a unique experience. There were moments in that trip that no one else is ever going to have, because they came out of nowhere,
Okay, I think we've adequately covered North Korea. I would recommend, please go, if you haven't seen it yet, go and check out Mike's 2-part series on his trip to DPRK. It's funny, interesting, enlightening, and again, you can see me for what it's worth. All right, let's stick with the axis of evil, though. Axis of evil countries, as George W. Bush categorized them. So you recently visited Iraq, which was unique because I believe your father was deployed to Iraq during the Second Gulf War in 2003. And so you've just went recently, and I think obviously your experience was quite different from what your father experienced, and you really showcased a very human side of the country. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the whole kind of idea for Iraq basically came off this bit that I was trying to do, right? So the video was going to be like going to Iraq 20 years after my dad, right, or something like that, or kind of the idea, the whole thing came off this joke, right? That I wanted to go to Iraq, and I wanted the video to open up with me phoning up my dad and telling him that I'm in Iraq, and just kind of hearing him go a little bit apeshit over the phone, because he spent I guess a total of about a year and a half there in total. He did 3 tours. And I remember him coming back from Iraq and saying, I never want to go back there ever again. So I had this bit that I was going to fly out there, I'm going to be in Baghdad, and I'm going to call him up and I'm going to tell him that I'm in Iraq. So that was my initial idea, and it didn't really go beyond that in the beginning stages. But then I kind of, when I was researching Iraq, I was like, oh my God, this is a place of just, abundance in terms of history, and it's the home of Mesopotamia and all of this, so much interesting stuff, right? That I could kind of build a bit of a parallel narrative on. There's this modern view of Iraq, and the only time I ever heard the word Iraq, was when it was related to war in the past 30 years, or my entire lifetime. I'm 29 now, so all I'd ever heard from Iraq was war. But I figured that there's so much more to it than that. And from what I'd heard, it's a fairly safe place to travel now, kind of as a solo traveler. So I think I was there for about two and a half, 3 weeks. And I didn't have much of a plan. I never really do. It's usually like, right, fly into the first place and then kind of have a rough itinerary and then just see where it lands me. I like to do a lot of hitchhiking, because I think you meet really great people that way. You meet a lot welcoming, hospitable people. And yeah, man, I had a wicked time. I had a wicked time in Iraq.
Yeah, and it's funny you talk about you doing that hitchhiking, and you do that again in your videos in China and Xinjiang. How do you get yourself into the headspace of being like? Because watching these videos, you'll get to a certain point, and then in Xinjiang, you tell your driver, if we get stopped by the police and the police have more questions for me, don't have to wait for me, just leave me. And to most people, they would like totally freak out. And for you, you're like, if I get a ride from someone, great. If not, I'll just roll out my sleeping bag on the side of the road here and be fine.
Yeah.
How do you get yourself into that headspace to be able just to kind of float through, it's one thing to go through without necessarily a plan, but it's another thing to put yourself in a position where you might just be out in the middle of nowhere, stranded. I mean, how do you tell yourself, like, in the end, it is going to be okay? Because these are situations that I think a lot of people would flip out about. Even your like more well-traveled people, they still, even if they are going to a quote unquote crazy place, they still want to do it in a structured way. I mean, that's like a lot of the people who travel with these group tours, like we do, because they want to see these places, but they still want it to be structured and controlled. So how do you let go of that control?
I think it probably, dude, comes out of a place of incredible naivety. Do you know what I mean? I think, and people tell me that, my own family have told me that before. I think in places like, I have a lot of trust in people, man. I'm a pretty good judge of like character, right? I know when I'm in the wrong car. I know when I'm in, the right car. Xinjiang specifically, very quickly after I arrived in China, I realized that, the police in Xinjiang generally were just there to help me. And it's awful. But as a 6'1" white dude with brown hair from the UK, you're kind of always going to be okay in somewhere like especially somewhere like Western China. I realized that very quickly. Wherever I was, and I was alone, people would stop and they would offer me food. They would offer me a ride. They wouldn't let me pay for things. And I became very, very comfortable very, very quickly in China. If I said to that woman, I said, hey, you go, I'll just stay here with the police. Like, I'm sweet. Like, there's a police station right here. I know nothing's going to happen to me. The worst case scenario is I'm going to stay here at the, by this police station. Or I'm going to get another ride, 2 hours down the road to where I was going. And that was on the Duku Highway. So kind of everyone's just going one way or the other. In Iraq was a bit of a different story because it was more of like a security kind of threat. Again, dude, my rule is generally you don't want to be hitchhiking after dark, right? So as long as I kind of wake up early enough, and if it gets to about 4:00 and it's looking like I'm not going to get to my destination tonight, I'll just find somewhere to sleep. I'll find a hotel. I'll find somewhere. I rarely put myself in a situation where I'm like totally fucked. I'm totally out there. Or if I am, like in Xinjiang, where there were no hotels on that highway, I do have a tent and I do have a sleeping bag, and it can be done. Bro, people like cycle. There are people that literally cycle from like, England to the eastern end of China, and they go through some incredibly remote places. I know that on my videos, and they are fairly remote, but I'm a pretty good judge of when I'm in trouble. And getting myself into that mindset, you just got to trust people, man. You just got to trust people. I'd probably be more scared doing it in the US than I would be anywhere in Asia.
That's true. And there's a reason why in the US, people don't hitchhike and they don't pick up hitchhikers. It's extremely uncommon. It faded out like 40 years ago. But like you, it's something I would never, I'm from the US, obviously. It's something I would never do back home. But if in a pinch in China, I would not be afraid to do it, for sure.
Oh, dude, 100%. And, it might take it might take you 7 hours on a train, and it might take you 2 days in a hitchhiking. But trust me, you're going to have more of an adventure if you do it hitchhiking.
I also wanted to ask you, you keep continuing to go back to India. to create content. What is it about India that keeps bringing you back?
It was the first kind of like off the beaten path place I traveled. So I'd spent about a year and a half in Vietnam at the time, incredibly popular country among backpackers. And I met this Indian girl at the time, and she told me to go and do this meditation retreat called Vipassana. She said, you got to go and do this thing. It's 10 days. I was broke. So she goes, it's free. And you learn how to do this meditation thing. So I've flown to India, and I've started my first ever trip in India, in a place called Bodh Gaya, doing a Vipassana meditation retreat. And it was so profound and so beautiful that everything that came after that in the next 2.5 months, I just had such an incredible trip. I went up to the Himalayas. I went, I spent some time down in Goa. I went into Rajasthan. I just fell in love with it, man. The people were awesome. For me, it was like this constant stimulation of like, you can go to like Jaipur, you can go to Delhi, you can go to Agra, and it is mental, and it is smelly, and it is dirty, and it is gross, and it is, the infrastructure is fucked. But you can also then, if you don't want to do that, you can also go up into Himachal Pradesh, or Ladakh, which is like Tibetan culture, and the food is different, the people look different, the language is different. And if you get bored of that, you can then go down into Kerala, where again the people look different, the language is different, the food is different. Northeast, same again. So for me, it was like having it's like having a visa for like 50 different countries, and it's also it made it better. I was in my very early 20s, so I was broke at the time, and it is quite a cheap country. But I just fell in love with it, man. I fell in love with the diversity of it. Again, I fell in love with this meditation technique that I was practicing at the time, and still try to continue to practice. But yeah, there's a phrase that I've got tattooed on my ribs, a Sanskrit phrase, Aditi Tavo Pava, which means treat your guests like gods. And there have been times in India where people have, taken me into their home to stay with them. They've fed me, they've given me rides, they've they've treated me so well because I'm a guest in their country. And it's something that that kind of mindset has totally disappeared now in the West, but it still very much exists in India. Again, there's the argument, is it down to the fact that I'm a privileged white dude in India? Possibly. And I'm very, very aware of this. I'm very aware that everywhere I go, you might have a different experience if you're a black man. You might have a different experience if you're a girl. You might have a different experience if you're of Indian descent and you travel back to India. Everywhere I go, I seem to be treated really well.
And are those some of the types of comments that you get on your?
To be honest with you, not really. It's just something that I'm aware of from traveling there, and like I do get a lot of comments for like, try doing this as a girl, or try doing this as, not a lot, but I get a few. But I was already aware of that before anyway. And that's one thing that kind of annoys me. I think that I know some female friends of mine that are like, oh, I would never ever travel to India because it's dangerous for women. And for me, making that statement is like closing this door. It's like closing these. If you go to India, so many doors could open up for you mentally, spiritually, physically. The people you meet, the things you do there. And by saying, oh, I'd never go there alone, you're like closing all of these doors. And I think that's a real shame. I do get it to an extent that, Indian men aren't used to seeing tiny blonde, 19-year-olds on the beach in their bikinis in Goa. But I think overall, it's a very rare case that women, Western women are they deal with these problems. And I think it's a real shame that people don't travel because they think somewhere is dangerous when largely it's not.
I would have to agree with that. And there are ways, obviously, in a place like India, there's such a wide breadth of experiences that you can have, places that you can visit. And, also Yeah, you don't have to go alone. You can go with friends. You can go with a tour group if you're concerned with your security. So there are things that you can do to mitigate those concerns rather than just closing the door completely. So I agree with you on that.
I'll tell you somewhere where I am looking at going into is Gaza at some point. I think that would be, a pretty fascinating place to go if it's done right. And you'd have to be incredibly sensitive, but that's somewhere that kind of feels like a kind of impossible place to travel to right now, doesn't it?
It does, but I think with obviously taking a nuanced approach and
it's doable. Yeah, so that's the plan at some point, anyway.
All right, so there was one more thing that I wanted to ask you, one more specific a video of yours that I wanted to ask about, because we talked about it in North Korea, so then I went and looked it up. And so your trip to the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone in Laos, that was a pretty crazy one. So how did that even come up on your radar? And then, first, do you want to tell our listeners what that is exactly and how it came up on your radar?
Yes, so the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone is a very small piece of land within the borders of Laos that also borders Myanmar and Thailand, making it a kind of a pretty valuable place to be because you've got a lot of drug smuggling coming in from Myanmar, in and out of Myanmar. Obviously, Thailand's a pretty powerful country in Southeast Asia. But the kind of caveat is it is owned and run by Chinese gangsters. They've got like a 99-year lease on this piece of land. Now, what they've done is they basically back in the day, people used to be able to launder money through Macau. Okay, but maybe 20 years ago. Macau was a really easy place for the Chinese to clean their money through the casinos and stuff. Now, things cracked down in Macau and they needed a new place to launder their money. So all of these kind of Chinese gangster triad bosses put shitloads of money into the Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone. And when you're in it, you are outside of Lao law. You're outside of Lao policing. There is no money there. There is a private security who are like the police within it. And it is essentially, it's a town, like a city, that is run by these Chinese gangsters, and it's used for, again, money laundering. So they can money launder through, there's a casino there. There are an uncountable amount of completely empty stores that I'm assuming they launder money through. There is drug smuggling in abundance that's kind of used to take in and out of Myanmar on the border. And it's also a big human trafficking zone. So there are these there are these scams where they'll get a lot of people from Pakistan or India. But okay, right. So I met these Pakistani dudes. They had thought they were getting a job in China, right? I met them on the streets and I said, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And they said they thought they were getting a job. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought as well. It's also a big place for human trafficking, not just in like prostitution, but in forcing people to work in scamming rings. So, for example, I met these Pakistani dudes who thought they were getting a job in China. They were taken to the Special Economic Zone in Laos, the Golden Triangle. Their passports were taken away, and now they are forced to pose as women online and essentially steal money from very wealthy people over in the West. So, in answer to your question, very long-winded answer to your question, it's a very bad place.
Yeah, it's quite the video, and you went through. I mean, it's just, you can tell even from when the second you walk in and you go to this like immaculate 5-star hotel and casino, and you can't use your credit card to pay for hotel room. You have to go to the ATM and get cash. You know, I mean, and then, obviously meeting these scammers on the street, and these guys have been human trafficked. They've had their passports taken and they're forced to pose as women and scam people out of money. And then you went through all kinds of stuff. The ATM, you left
I lost
your debit card
out,
at the ATM?
I went to go to the, I went to get cash out for the hotel, and I went and got like $300 out of the ATM or whatever. And maybe even less than that, maybe like 150, and went back to the hotel, and I left my bank card in the ATM, which I didn't realize until about 4 hours later. And it was my one and only bank card. It was a sketchy place, man. I spent a lot of my time there feeling incredibly paranoid. It was after I spoke to those scammers. Actually, I walked around thinking, Jesus Christ, I walk around this place like I stick out like a sore thumb. I'm the only white dude in this entire area. And I've booked a room on the top floor of the casino that they launder all the money through. And I was just shitting my pants the entire time, man. It was not a fun.
As in, are you implying you might have accidentally fallen from the high room? Is that the?
It wasn't necessarily that I think I would have fallen. The windows were barred up anyway. But
well, you know what I'm saying. Fallen, quote unquote.
Yes, quote unquote. Yes, I know. I get what you're saying. Quote unquote fallen. I just think that it was probably, it wasn't the most kind of. I could have done it in a much more subtle way. But yeah, dude, that place was gnarly, man. Going into actually the only other place where I've seen. Do you remember we went into that place in North Korea with the Tiger Bone whiskey? That's the only other place I've seen it in the world is there. But yeah, dude, that was a sketchy place. And that was a very sketchy place. And actually, when I released that video and put it out there, I was like, oh, this isn't going to be. People aren't going to resonate with this because nothing really happens. I didn't really talk to many people. I just was real. I included the thing with the bank card. I included the having a few beers. I included the losing all my money in the casino, which I wasn't allowed to film. But people seems to resonate with it pretty well, which is and again where I think I was doing well with the authenticity stuff.
Yeah, and it's obviously I haven't seen any other influencers cover that place, so it's very cool from that perspective. So I mean, talking about this Golden Triangle Special Economic Zone, North Korea, China, Xinjiang, which when we mentioned Xinjiang, we didn't talk about. I think most of our listeners will be aware that it's quite controversial because you have the Chinese in there, and basically the indigenous population of the Uyghurs are oppressed by the Chinese government there, and that's quite controversial. So, you've covered these sensitive topics in your videos and regions with political tension. So how, and human rights concerns. So how do you navigate sort of this ethical responsibility of sharing these stories and also any negative backlash that you might face, either in comments or from the media?
Yeah, I think the number one thing I say to myself is if I can go in somewhere, right, and try to be, in terms of the topic I'm covering, whether it be like, the Uyghurs, again, I didn't touch too much on the Uyghurs when I went there, was because my whole thing is I'm not going in somewhere with a bias, right? It's what happens if a, fairly uneducated 28-year-old with a $400 consumer camera goes into these areas. Again, I wasn't educated in journalism. I never really knew what I was doing. It was just, if I can go in there, film exactly what I see and come out showing the world what I saw, then I don't think I really have anyone else to answer to. It's not a political channel. I'm not going in and it's a tough one, man. Especially with the Uyghurs, because that's it's a super controversial topic. No one really kind of has that much solid evidence of this genocide that's happening. So I didn't feel that comfortable talking about it when I was there. Again, it's just what happens if I go into a place what do I see? Do you know what I mean? So I don't really know. I haven't had much backlash really. The only thing I've had backlash on was a lot of people telling me that they think I'm making paid propaganda for China. Yeah, in terms of handling backlash, dude, you just don't. Do you know what I mean? You let people say what they want to say about you online, and I just go and do my job, which is to show your average Joe what it looks like to travel through Xinjiang or Iraq or the Golden Special Economic Zone in the Golden Triangle.
You know what I mean? For sure. I mean, I've traveled through Xinjiang in 2017, and it was, of course, the closest that I'd ever been through a bona fide police state with the checkpoints every, however many kilometers. Yeah. And, we had, of course, special treatment as foreigners, and the police were helpful, and we didn't have to, get out and show, go through the same process that the Uyghurs who were traveling had to go through and things like that. So we were somewhat shielded from these things, but you still could see it happening. I mean, it's there. I mean, you could tell it's a highly restricted police state. But, it's very similarly, you just take it, as it comes, so, so are there, you mentioned Gaza. So are there any other destinations, though, that are on your bucket list that whether they're sort of impossible to do, so something that's going to have to be done much later?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to go to Syria after the UK. So that'll be hopefully at the end of April. Syria is very possible. Yeah. I mean, do you guys run a thing to Syria? Do Young Pioneer do a Syria tour?
Yes, we do, and we also do them as independent tours as well.
Okay, very cool. So yeah, I'm in touch with a guy that works for an NGO that kind of work on humanitarian projects in Syria since the fall of Assad. Well, they've been doing it for years, but mostly since the fall of Assad. And they've contacted me and they've been like, look, we can get you into mass grave sites, all the prisons across the country. We're also doing a few delegations on bringing Syrians back to Damascus that have been displaced. So I'm going to probably go to Syria, and then I'm also in touch with a Chinese woman who reckons there's like a 5-day trek, right? There's like a 5-day trek across the Tian Shan Mountains that can only be done on foot or on horseback to go and see these Kazakh nomads. So that'll be something I'm looking at doing before the summer. In terms of long-term bucket list, dude, it's gonna take some time of sitting down and figuring it out. I'd love to. I was chatting with my dad the other day, and he had some good ideas about, like, I think content creators focus on Asia and they focus on dangerous places. I think it would be interesting to go to, like, the southern states of the US. You know what I mean, and do something there. Like, how mad would it be if I what does that look like? How dangerous is that compared to some actually, bona fide dangerous places I've been to, But that's the thing again, dude. I'm not a political content creator, so I just feel like I'm in this weird situation where I'm going to countries that can be considered highly politically sensitive, whilst trying not to get into the politics of it all. And that's why I'm kind of trying to tread this line at all times, But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for going to a place without an agenda and letting the place and the people there speak for themselves. I mean, that's one of the things that fuels what we do at YPT. I mean, we get some of the same criticisms that you might get for showcasing some of the places that you showcase in your videos, and people say, well, why would you run tours to such a place? And we say, again, it's about giving people access so they can form an educated opinion. And we're not political, and that's what drives it. And I think for you too, you're showing people just like an unfiltered, unbiased look at the places, and you let them speak for themselves.
Yeah, dude, 100%. I think that what you guys do is, it's exactly that, man. It's giving people, like, and especially people that don't have the want to go and do it by themselves, you're opening the world up to people, and I think it's a great thing that you guys do.
Well, and the feeling is mutual, Mike. So I'm down to my,
Thanks, mate.
well, I'm down to my last question. So, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone that wants to travel more adventurously, but they're not really sure where to start? I'm not going to say how would you advise somebody to start a YouTube channel? Let's just say travel more adventurously.
Yeah, I would say that you've got to be more trusting of people and the world. The world isn't as big as you think, and I mean, there's not really much advice I can give you on taking that first step, because you're either someone that's going to do it or someone that's not. But the advice I can give you is, when you do get to somewhere, right? Let's say you're completely alone and you're in a place with no other Western tourists or people like yourself, and you're only surrounded by locals, and you're sitting in some hotel. I've sat in hotel rooms, dude, in new countries, completely alone, completely isolated and lonely, and I've cried. Like, I've literally cried, and I've thought, what have I done? I was just with, a beautiful girl in England, and in my beautiful family and my beautiful job, and I've flown out here, and I'm sat in the middle of, Srinagar in Kashmir, in northern India, in far north of India, and I've cried, dude, because I'm like, this is so shit.
This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful
life. Exactly, dude. And my advice would be, it does get better. Like, you're gonna have moments where you're gonna be lonely. You're gonna have moments where you're gonna be isolated, but you'll be missing home. You'll be feeling like shit. You lost your bank card, and you run out of money, and you don't know where you're going to sleep later. It always gets better. That specific moment when I was in Kashmir, and I was just so depressed and lonely, about 2 days later, I met this really awesome Spanish dude, and we had a great adventure together for the next 5 days. And I immediately stopped missing that girl and that house and those people. So it's just, you need to get out of your head. It's going to be scary. It's going to be isolating. It's going to be shit. But you just got to give it a chance. And I promise you, it will give something back to you. And in terms of taking that first step, you just got to start trusting people and realize that the world isn't that small.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing your insights on your travels and the behind the scenes of your videos. And obviously, I wish you all the success and the continued growth of your YouTube channel and following, and being able to showcase these weird, wacky, and wonderful places to people, and hopefully encourage people to go there. And I hope also, of course, we get the chance to travel together again. So for the listeners at home, where can they see your content?
You can see me on YouTube, Mike OK, and on Instagram, Mike OKYT. I'm looking at getting the TikTok up and running again. But yeah, YouTube, Instagram, give me a follow. And thank you so much for having me, Justin. I appreciate it. I'm still, my life has changed drastically in the past 8 months. So I'm still getting used to, doing stuff like this, having chats about these places. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on and have a chat with you. And I've had a great time, and thank you for everything you do.
Well, likewise. And thanks for being here on the Young Pioneer Podcast. Talk to you soon. As we do at the end of every episode of the Young Pioneer Podcast, we do have to do a little bit of self-promotion. So, are you ready to step off the beaten path and into the gritty, untold corners of the world? Of course you are. You're listening to this podcast. As you know, our adventures are about more than just sightseeing. They're about uncovering the raw stories and transformations shaped by history's deepest conflicts. Join us as we journey beyond the guidebooks and into the heart of regions misunderstood and uncharted. First, I'd like to highlight our Laos Secret War Tour. Running July 4th through 9th, 2025, Discover the hidden depths of Laos, the most bombed country per capita. Trek through remote villages, explore secret war relics, and embrace the spirit of a land defined by survival and tradition. Next, we have our Colombia Civil War and Narcos tour running from May 6th to 14th. Scratch beneath the surface of Colombia's narco legacy and revolutionary history. From Bogota to Medellin, experience the transformation of a nation and meet the people who lived through its most turbulent times. And last but not least, we have our Syria Revolution Anniversary Tour running December 3rd through 9th. Step into Syria's heart where war and rebirth coexist. From Damascus to Aleppo, witness the resilience of a country rebuilding from conflict and engage with the revolutionary spirit that drives its renewal. And as we've seen through the stories of history's most famous travelers, while their journeys paved the way, today's world offers unprecedented ease and opportunity to explore even the most hard-to-reach corners of the earth. So join us and make your own adventures. I'm Justin Martell, and this has been another episode of the Young Pioneer Podcast.